Okay, Janet, I think that's fine now.
Thank you. Thank you, Julia. And it's lovely to be here. We have a moment's sunshine in the UK, which is very unusual, despite the fact that it's summer here. But anyway, the sun is shining briefly, and it's a lovely day to be able to welcome Sarah, who will be our speaker after our time of meditation. And I'm incredibly grateful to her because she's had a very busy weekend at the UK conference as our speaker. And I just said to her, it's a shame she couldn't have had a lie-in this morning. But nevertheless, it's an absolute delight that she's going to be with us. And Sarah is an Anglican priest and theologian based in Australia. So I'll say a little bit more about her when I introduce her and her talk. So let's just have our opening prayer. O God, come to our assistance. O Lord, make haste to help us. Glory be to the Father, to the Son, and to the Holy Spirit, as it was, and now, and forever will be. Amen. So our reading before our time of meditation from Mark's Gospel, chapter 2. Pronouncement about the Sabbath. One Sabbath he was going through the cornfields, and as they made their way, his disciples began to pluck heads of grain. The Pharisees said to him, "Look, why are they doing what is not lawful on the Sabbath?" And he said to them, "Have you never read what David did when he and his companions were hungry and in need of food? He entered the house of God when Abiathar was high priest and ate the bread of the presence, which is not lawful for any but the priest to eat, and he gave some to his companions. Then he said to them, the Sabbath was made for humankind, and not humankind for the Sabbath. So the Son of Man is Lord even of the Sabbath." Again he entered the synagogue, and a man was there who had a withered hand. They watched him to see whether he would cure him on the Sabbath, so that they might accuse him. And he said to the man who had the withered hand, "Come forward." Then he said to them, "Is it lawful to do good or to do harm on the Sabbath, to save life or to kill?" But they were silent. He looked around at them with anger. He was grieved at their hardness of heart and said to the man, "Stretch out your hand." He stretched it out, and his hand was restored. The Pharisees went out and immediately conspired with the Herodians against him, how to destroy him. Heavenly Father, open our hearts to the silent presence of the Spirit of your Son. Lead us into that mysterious silence where your love is revealed to all who call. Maranatha, come, Lord Jesus. Well, this is a delight. I know Judy and Paul from Australia know Sarah very well, and they said, look after her. And I said, yes, of course. So it is a delight to welcome Sarah. A little bit about Sarah, although she's quite well known to many of us from her writings as well as her talks. So Sarah is an Anglican priest, a theologian based in Canberra in Australia, and honorary research fellow of the Australian Catholic University with a special interest in philosophy, ethics, and spirituality. And all I can say to all of that is, wow, that's an amazing gift that you're offering to the development of this place and space that we call the contemplative world. And a founder member of the Benedict'S Contemplative Church. And I'm sure we'll hear a little bit more about her work. But most importantly is that she's a very long-standing member, committed member of WCCM. So it's a great joy, as I say, to welcome her and look forward to hearing what you have to share, Sarah. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Janet, and thank you to you all for having me. It's lovely to share this time with you, and I'm coming to you from the UK, where as Janet mentioned, I've been part of the UK National Conference over this past weekend, and I'm giving some talks in the coming week. Today, the theme of the little reflection I'm sharing today is savoring Sabbath. And I guess this notion of Sabbath and Sabbath rest is something that seems deeply congruent with the contemplative vision of life, and something that many of us are drawn to, this notion of slowing down and resting and making space. And yet, as the reading that we had from the Gospel of Mark to begin, there's a sense in which Jesus himself has a kind of ambivalent relationship to Sabbath or Sabbath keeping, at least as it's practiced in his day. And so this reflection is a attempt to tease out some of those strands for us. So this is from the Law of Ancient Israel. Observe the Sabbath day and keep it holy, as the Lord your God commanded you. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work, but the seventh day is a Sabbath to the Lord your God. You shall not do any work, you or your son or your daughter, or your male or female slave, or your ox or your donkey, or any of your livestock, or the resident alien in your towns, so that your male and female slave may rest as well as you. Remember that you were a slave in Egypt, and the Lord your God brought you out from there with a mighty hand and an outstretched arm. Therefore, the Lord your God commanded you to keep the Sabbath day. Well, a couple of things strike me in these words. The first is the connection between Sabbath rest and the creation or the constitution of the people of Israel. Remember that you were a slave in Egypt, and the Lord your God brought you out from there. Therefore, the Lord your God commanded you to keep the Sabbath day. But what's the intrinsic connection here? Why not? Remember that you were a slave in Egypt, and the Lord your God brought you out from there. Therefore, make sure to pay God back by maximizing your effort at all times and extracting as much from yourself and from others as you can. Why does the commandment to rest follow from the injunction to remember what God has done for you? Could it be that Sabbath observance is designed to keep God's people from the illusion of self-sufficiency, as if they could just take it from here without regularly stopping to receive or recognize the gift of their life? The second thing that's striking in this commandment to rest on the Sabbath is that it applies to everyone. It's not a luxury afforded to the elite, while slaves and animals keep the wheels of productivity turning. In this case, it's very different from the contemplative leisure that you might find in ancient Greece or Rome, which depends on the ongoing labor of those who are not the leisured class. But in this understanding, householders are explicitly obligated to ensure that all life within their orbit, slaves, both male and female, livestock, and even resident aliens, migrant workers, even they may rest as well as you. In the list of the 10 Commandments, the instruction to observe the Sabbath day and keep it holy is number 4. Walter Brueggemann suggests it forms a bridge between the first 3 commandments, which are to do with honouring the truth of God, and the last 6 commandments, which are to do with honouring one's neighbour. The practice of rest seems to be the linchpin. And I wonder if it's that by enacting our receptivity to gift through resting on the Sabbath day, I wonder if it's that enables us to see our fellowship with all those with whom we share life. It forms us to let go the compulsion to grasp at life, which shows up as the tendency to exploit those around us and be greedy for more. Walter Brueggemann writes, Sabbath is a break with our idolatries and a break with our greed. It catches the main accents of all the 10 commandments, and rest is the linchpin. In the community of Benedictus, which I lead, as Janet mentioned, we're preparing to observe a Sabbath month in our community, in the 7th month of the year, in July. And we're committing to resting from some of our work and activity in order to practice remembering that our lives, separately and together, are constituted first by the gift of God and not by our own efforts. We're allowing each other space and time simply to be. And so we hope to be more present to God and to the sheer being of one another. This isn't going to be the complete Sabbath that was practiced in ancient Israel. People will still have to go to their jobs and they'll still have families to look after and many other commitments. So we're not going to have an experience of total Sabbath, but we're wanting to explore what the impact and what the experience of being conscious of practicing a corporate Sabbath might make possible in our community, what it might reveal to us. And we'll reflect on it afterwards, what happened. I think it's particularly important to be open to this experience because as Brueggemann again notes, in our culture, the practice of Sabbath keeping is a kind of prophetic act. In our contemporary context of the rat race of anxiety, he says, the celebration of Sabbath is an act of both resistance and alternative. It is resistance because it's a visible insistence that our lives are not defined by the production and consumption of commodity goods, or by general busyness and a feeling of usefulness. And he goes on, Sabbath is not only resistance, it is alternative. The alternative on offer is the awareness and practice of the claim that we are situated on the receiving ends of the gifts of God. And so that's the awareness that we're seeking to bring to this time. But if this is what we're looking forward to as a community, our reading today seems just a little awkward or contradictory. For Jesus is depicted here, as elsewhere in the Gospels, as not particularly committed to the practice of Sabbath observance. He allows his disciples to pluck grain when they're hungry, thus doing, as the Pharisees put it, what is not lawful on the Sabbath. He heals the withered hand of a man in the synagogue. In some other stories of healing on the Sabbath, Jesus is said to respond to a spontaneous request for help. And in those stories, you might think, well, he couldn't do anything else. His compassion demanded of him that he act in that circumstance. But here, he's the one who seems to initiate the encounter. It's an act which appears deliberately and willfully transgressive. And in fact, the whole scene has the kind of a feel of a standoff at high noon. Jesus enters the town, we're told, and he goes into the synagogue. He's looking at the Pharisees who are looking at him. They watched him to see whether he would cure on the Sabbath so that they might accuse him. Jesus causes the tension to build by inviting the man with the withered hand to come forward. Everyone knows something's up. He turns to the Pharisees as if goading them with their scruples, their care for keeping the Sabbath holy. It's as if he's saying, should I? Shouldn't I? Will I? Won't I? Is it lawful to do good or to do harm on the Sabbath, to save life or to kill? They're silent, and he, so the text says, is angry, grieved at their hardness of heart. Stretch out your hand, he says to the man, and restores it. The Pharisees' prior judgment of him is confirmed, their desire to destroy him justified. They go out of the synagogue and immediately conspire in an unholy alliance with the Herodians, a political group with whom they are usually at odds, but with whom they now share in common cause against Jesus. So what is it about the Sabbath and the practice of Sabbath keeping that for Jesus seems to have been so problematic, so in need of challenge and even deliberate subversion? I think it's that although it was originally given to the people of Israel to enable and serve the cause of life, which is to say, the cause of their awareness of the practice of the presence of God, awareness of the sharedness of their life with one another. That's its original function, but by Jesus' day, the practice of Sabbath keeping, together with other aspects of the law, had come to function primarily for another purpose. Correct observance had become an end in itself, an identity marker for defining who belongs and who doesn't, who's righteous and who isn't. A practice designed to draw people into shared remembrance of the source of their life and shared fellowship as recipients of gift, had become a means of asserting the superiority of some over others and policing the limits of belonging. James Allison says, this is the kind of logic which defines what he calls systems of goodness. And the thing about a system of goodness is that no matter how admirable its professed values, it's always incipiently violent, functioning to condemn those beyond it and control those within it. And here we might think of some of the systems of goodness that define and control us, whether in church contexts, whether in progressive or conservative political circles, whether in family and workplace value systems, where we all implicitly know what can and can't be said, what can and can't be done. We think of how different communities enforce what they deem to be authorized behaviors, language, associations, all in the name of the good. I think that when Jesus acts to subvert the Pharisees' policing of Sabbath observance in his day, it's not because he's rejecting its deepest meaning and gift. Rather, he's contesting its use to enforce a system of goodness. He's drawing attention to the way a law, this law, any law, given for our good, may come to block the exercise of love and mercy rather than to enable it, as in the case of the man with the withered hand. Of course, with the benefit of hindsight, we know who the goodies and the baddies are in this story. We know whose side we're on. But at the time, Jesus' appearance in the religious landscape of first century Palestine did demand discernment. Was he just a narcissist or a zealot or an anarchic rule breaker who thought the rules didn't apply to him? Or was he really tuned in to the deeper goodness that the law was supposed to express and make available at the human level? The Pharisees aren't wrong to be concerned about that question, but the issue is, do they know how to discern it? Do they recognize that deeper reality, that deeper attunement to which out of which he's coming and which he's seeking to point us to? And just as he demands that kind of discernment from the Pharisees, so he demands that we discern our own practices and commitments, the nature of our engagement with the truths we cherish and believe in. Where are our disciplines and practices functioning truly to serve the good we and they profess? And where is the way we go about it, the way we hold on to them, the way we seek to define ourselves and others in relation to them, where is that actually functioning to divide us from one another by fortifying our righteousness and justifying our hardness of heart towards those we find unacceptable or challenging? In a world deeply divided about where our real good lies, these aren't easy questions. And perhaps that's why it's more than ever important to remember the sourcing of our lives in gift and in love, to take time to rest in grace. And so more than ever important to observe the Sabbath day and keep it holy. As contemplatives, this is, I think, the invitation to us in our own lives, in our own contexts and communities. It's part of perhaps the witness, both the prophetic resistance and the making visible of a prophetic alternative in the larger systems of which we are part. Savouring Sabbath and the way we do it. That's the question I think that this gospel opens for us. So I hope you find that something fruitful to reflect on in the context of your own life. Thank you.
Wow. I think, Sarah, what you'll find in a moment is there'll be lots of comments coming through in the chat. I think Mary does her magic and lets you have those comments. But what's clear is that we need to hear that again. And fortunately, we have it on YouTube. And it's the sort of talk, the sharing that you've given, that will continue to feed and nourish us as we listen to it again. And maybe to really stop and pause as you ask those questions of us. A truly wisdom talk for us to take forward in our own lives as contemplatives. I took notes, but I gave up note-taking to just listen and to be present to what you were offering. But at the very beginning, I was really just the very fact that you're saying rest. What do we mean by rest? And contemplatives are as busy as any other human being, and reminding ourselves what that means, that resting, honouring God, so that we can honour our neighbour. To rest and be fully present and aware of God's presence to us. Such simple requests of us, and yet so difficult to achieve, it seems to me. So I'm really moved by what you were offering, and I know that we all were here. And I just thank you from the bottom of my heart. So as the chats come in, as you may be distracted, Sarah, to read them, but I promise you, Mary will make sure that you have sight of them. Let's just end with our closing prayer. May the divine assistance be always with us and with our absent brothers and sisters. Amen. So I'll hand over to Julia or Mary.
It's me today, and I'm just trying to, got it. So yes, Sarah, that was very, very powerful. Thank you ever so much. I will get the chats all copied and emailed to you to peruse at your leisure. Can't thank you enough for giving up this precious time to us when you've been on such a tight schedule and you've had such a busy weekend. We really do appreciate it. Turning to next week, our talker next week is Neil Zoladkovich. I hope I've pronounced that right. And he's going to be talking on, just bear with me 1 second. Stability, an oblate's relationship with his monastery. Neil is an oblate of Ealing Abbey in West London in the UK. He's a retired drama teacher and lives in southwest London, and he still gives talks on drama and script writing and continues to write plays and short stories. He's currently treasurer of the UK Oblates team, which runs a website and organises online and residential retreats. He was the UK National Coordinator for International Oblates Congress in Rome last year, and he also writes a blog, Oblate, a Benedictine in the World. So very interesting to listen to what he's got to say about stability and the Oblate's relationship to the monastery, which in our case is a monastery without walls. So looking forward to hearing what he has to say next week. And it just remains for me to thank all of you for joining us at the various times of the day and night that it is for you, to wish you a happy and blessed week, and I look forward to seeing you all again on Benedict's Well next Monday. Thank you and God bless.
Thank you. Thank you again, Sarah.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Sarah. Thank you all.